Someone killed my parents. What? Someone killed my parents. Are you still there? Yeah. The people... No. Who was the person next to the shot? My mom and my dad. Mom and dad?
Now for what's trending in true crime, the Menendez brothers are back in the headlines as they're opening up from behind bars. That's right. In a phone interview with TMZ's podcast, Two Angry Men, Erik Menendez spoke about some of the trauma that he and his brother Lyle have faced while in prison for the past 35 years.
I was picked on, bullied violently, and it was traumatic. And it was continual. And, you know, those are things that a lot of inmates in prison go through. And when they're not part of a gang structure and they come in and they're basically lone wolf, you know, they just have to be by themselves. And so it added a great deal. Prison can be hard, and there's a lot of suffering in prison.
The podcast is hosted by TMZ's Harvey Levin and the brothers' attorney, Mark Garagos. So this morning we're asking the question, are the Menendez brothers sharing these stories for sympathy? We know they've got a huge push coming up to get out of prison. So what's the motivation behind doing the podcast? Hit us up with your thoughts on social media, and let's bring in our guests now. I want to welcome into the conversation criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Joe Tamburino, and still with us, clinical psychologist and narcissistic abuse expert Dr. Jamie Zuckerman. Dr. Jamie, let me start with you, please. Do you think this is a ploy for sympathy?
Possibly. I do think that they're being honest about it. I do think that they've probably experienced some things we can't fathom. But yeah, it could possibly be, given what's approaching.
Sure. Joe Tamburino, you know every legal move matters as they're coming up on the big day just weeks ahead where they're going to be going before the court and pushing for a recommendation from the district attorney's office for release. Tell me, what do you think could be the motivator behind this?
It's 100% a ploy to try to get out front and say, look, they've been abused enough. Not only do we, according to the defense, have new evidence of this letter, that, you know, the judge in the second trial didn't allow all of the evidence in of sexual abuse, though he did allow quite a bit, and the jury just didn't buy it. But now they're saying, you know, in the 30-plus years they've been in prison, they've been bullied, beaten up. I think one of them had their jaw broken at some point. So absolutely, this is not just serendipitous. This is part of a plan to get some sympathy for these guys when they try to get resentenced or released.
Joe, great points. Dr. Jamie, I want to go back to you and pick your brain about whether you think, in general, not just with this podcast, in general, are these guys manipulative?
You know, they had been through so much trauma and so much abuse that I do believe that in their minds they felt they did what was necessary to survive. I do believe that. I don't believe them to be manipulative in their podcast, in any of the interviews that I've seen. I think they have been through things that we cannot fathom, and what that does to somebody as a child all the way into their late teens, early adulthood is absolutely damaging. Do I think that they're going to need, and I've said this before, do I think they're going to continue to need support and therapy, you know, all throughout their lives? Absolutely. Do I think that they're being manipulative in their approach, just and how they've spoken to interviewers, how they've spoken to people during their incarceration? No, I don't. I think that they've been through hell and back. I really do.
Dr. Jamie, thank you for that. Let's look at the idea that they could possibly be freed. So they've been incarcerated for 35 years. We know that they were supposed to have gone before the court already, but because of the terrible California wildfires, the DA's office made a smart move in postponing that case. Everybody agreed it needs to be postponed for more pressing matters to go in front of it. On March 20th and 21st, that is when they're going to be in court trying to ask the DA to recommend to the judge release. There's no guarantee the judge will order a resentencing for them. No guarantee for that, but it starts with, could the DA possibly do something to help them? That would be the first step. Lyle spoke about how the two of them are feeling about their future on the podcast. Let's take a listen.
My brother and I are cautiously hopeful, and we're just, you know, we're in prayer with our family, and we're hopeful, and we're just trying not to go a little crazy in the interim, like you said.
Again, that's the TMZ podcast, Two Angry Men, hosted by Harvey Levin and Mark Garagos, who represents the Menendez brothers. So what are the chances they get released? The million-dollar question. Joe Tamburino, your thoughts on this, please.
Highly unlikely they get released. I mean, think of it this way. They're saying that we have new evidence, that there's this letter that says, well, it substantiates that they were physically and sexually abused by their father. And supposedly this letter was written 8 months before the murders happened. It's never been brought up before. We've never actually had any experts say that the letter was written 8 months before the murder. So it's, you know, it's a little tenuous as to the argument that this is really the smoking gun that will get them free. And they're saying that, well, you know, in the second trial, the Judge Weisberg at the time, he really didn't let a lot of evidence in about the sexual assault. And that's a little bit misleading, because in the second trial, Judge Weisberg sure did allow the defense to talk about the sex assaults. He allowed them to get on the stand, talk about it. The thing he limited was the Menendez brothers wanted to get in some other stories, other tales of abuse from when they were quite younger than in their teens. And the judge said that basically is too far afield. So the Menendez brothers did get sexual assault, sexual violations into evidence, and this letter now appears. And the letter doesn't actually say that they were sexually abused. It does talk very bad about their father, there's no doubt, calls him crazy and everything, but they never actually say they were sexually abused.
Joe, excellent points. Thank you for all of that. I'm in agreement with you. Let's say, for the sake of our analysis, though, let's just say that they are released. Dr. Jamie, are they a danger to society?
I think that if they do not, like I said, continuously are involved in regimented treatment and tracked and followed, and really just look at the rest of their life as just constantly having to work on this abuse and trauma that they've endured, I think that they're at risk for making poor decisions. Yeah, I do.
Dr. Jamie, thank you for that. And thank you for your time this morning. I know we have to say goodbye to you. Again, follow Dr. Jamie Zuckerman, Dr. Z, on social media, expert in narcissistic abuse and practicing psychologist. Thank you kindly.